Hello friends, welcome to this online refresher course that is Concerns in Educational Research and Assessment under ARPIT 2019. I am Arvind Kumar Jha from Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow, and extending my greetings to you all on behalf of National Resource Center for Education, that is NRC for Education, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya. I am here to discuss with you on a very important and relevant topic, that is a narrative inquiry. We'll discuss this topic in different parts. In first part, we shall talk about narrative turn in humanities, social science research, then moving on to what is narrative inquiry, and finally narrative inquiry as storytelling. Let's first talk about narrative turn. In the introduction to their recent interdisciplinary collection, Lewis and Sandra Henchman offer some suggestions for the recent narrative turn in the humanities and its repercussions and its implications is there in the field of research as well. First, in contrast to theories that impose a mechanistic model of human behavior, narrative emphasizes the active, self-shaping quality of human thought, and that's the beauty of narrative inquiry. Second, narrative can be used as an act of resistance to mainstream social science research, even educational research, which is often insufficiently attentive to the plurality of stories that cultures and subcultures tell about themselves. In short, what I want to say is that every culture grows with its own story, and this is what makes the civilization of that story a unique one. Thirdly, the narrative embeds social phenomena firmly within the web of communication out of which they arise. And these are the words taken from Henchman. Friends, before I move over, what kind of conclusions and inferences we can draw from these 3 points? Let me tell you one thing. You'll find that the life is nothing, but the life is a story, a grand story, full of experiences. So to develop a narrative conception of the self is to draw attention to the extent to which our identity is shaped with and by others. And that's why time and again I have maintained a point that if you really want to understand the shaping of the self or shaping of the identity of the human personalities, human persona, human minds, then instead of focusing on asking something verbally or asking them to participate in interview, it is better to ask them to share their life stories with you, which will help you to intervene the finest experiences of the person, and you can build a grand narrative of entire humanity. Such a conception makes questions of ends and beginnings central and foregrounds aspects of the self which have an incapacity temporarily dimensions such as integrity, authenticity, and remembrance. To make narrative a central concern is also to raise questions about the nature and scope of qualitative research, and the researchers as well to see his or her own activity as situated in time and space and in relation not to some eternal realm of truth but to an ongoing process of human inquiry. We begin to think where we live, as Raymond Williams so nicely puts it. But we also think when we live. Narrative inquiry helps the researcher to understand a particular kind of experiences. And as I said, experience is the key of human life. Narrative is the form in which we both structure our life stories, that is the biography, and the stories of the communities within which those life stories are lived, that is the history. So acknowledging the relationship between narrative and identity entails recognizing that research is not an activity that takes place outside of established patterns of meanings. The researcher is situated within a particular context from which he or she draws the resource for critical reflection. And narrative inquiry is one of the best tools for the critical reflection. When you reflect critically, you not only tell your story on the basis of the facts, but also on the basis of your lived experiences. And that's the key to understand the human behavior, human mind, even I won't hesitate to say the entire existence of humanity as well. However, that context can itself be within in different ways. And one of the claims that is frequently made on behalf of narrative is that, in contrast to models, causal explanations and abstractions, narrative remains close to the episodes of human life. And particularly when you conduct qualitative research, what do you want to capture? You want to capture the essence of human life. As a student, as a teacher, as an administrator, as educational planning, as an educational policy planner. Therefore, friends, I would like to say narrative, as many postmodernists have pointed out, is not immune from the problems of abstraction. Narrative inquiry is the best when it is a genuine attempt to think what we are doing as a researcher. So it always allows you to think. It's not only that you just somebody is narrating, you note it down, and on the basis of that you create a story and you say, oh, this is what the thing is. Continuously it provides an opportunity to think. So before I move over to what is narrative inquiry, so I would like to tell you that if you are really interested to understand educational phenomena from the bottom of the lived experiences, you have to decide what kind of narrative inquiry you require to understand a human biography. Always what happens, people always ask others, have you read the biography of others, biography or so and so? I always emphasize, why don't you write your own biography, read your biography, that will help you to understand your development. And that's why it is good practice that every year you should write your own biography. Either you can write in parts or you can write in an integrated way. Why? Because that will give you a chance to construct your own story. As you know that it is said that person is a product of his or her own narratives. As you construct your narrative, so you become. Suppose if your culture, your society allows you to create and construct your own story, you will become that. If the society doesn't allow you to do so, it's very difficult that you will come out with this. So therefore, it is important to understand the essence of stories in your life, in your culture, in your society, in your civilization. That's why see what is happening. When a child is born, at that moment of life, when he starts understanding a particular language, the old generation starts sharing their stories, because the stories are the powerful tools to shape your psyche. And these stories as a tool to influence the psyche has been used in almost all civilizations, in almost all cultures, and that's why narrative inquiry is an opportunity to understand not only the human in its existence, but it also will help you your cultural existence, your civilizational existence, even your existential reality of your thinking mind to understand in a better way at in-depth level. Now friends, I'll be talking about what is a narrative inquiry. So narrative inquiry is to establish purposes, describe processes, and provide a convincing rationale for narrative modes of knowing. There are thousands of modes of knowing. You can know in n number of ways, but narrative modes of knowing is considered one of the best modes of knowing. Interpreting and restructuring, it has a unique capacity to fathom essence of human experiences. I repeat, to fathom the essence of human experiences. I would like to quote here John Dewey. John Dewey asserts that the ultimate aim of research is the study of human experience. And that's why it is said, any kind of research you indulge in the field of education, do ask yourself, is this research is going to help you to unearth some of the hidden aspects of the lived experiences of human reality or not. Clendenin and Connelly have made a good cause for narrative as epistemological stance, research methodology, and scholarly discourse, all uniquely capable of getting at the content of human experience. If you look at his understanding or his proposition about the narrative inquiry, you will find it is a capable, not only potent from the epistemological point of view, but also it is a potent from the point of view of the methodological stand. And when you combine both, it will provide you a chance to reach to the inside of the content of human experience. Friends, narrative captures and investigates experiences as a human beings live them in time, in space, in person, and in relationship. So that's why the experience cannot be considered of any phenomena as a singular phenomena. It is generally affected by the time in which you have lived your experiences. It is affected by the space in which you have lived your experiences and with the relationship. And that's why relationship is the essence of human existence. So those who undertake narrative inquiry need to attend to at least three-dimensional inquiry space: the temporal, the spatial, and the personal social. Human lives are woven of narratives. As I said, life is nothing but life is a product of your own narratives. So that's why many researchers out of their researches based on narrative inquiry have emphasized that human lives are woven of narratives. Individuals construct their identities, individuals construct their self through their own and others' narratives. So it's not that only my narrative will help me and influence myself and identity, but also the narratives of others help me to shape not only myself and identity, I would like to say my entire persona, even to the great extent of psyche itself. Why should I live a moral life? Then you go back to your culture and you find certain figures have been in your culture who have really taught to the entire culture that what is the significance of being moral and how you make yourself insignificant, not in your own culture only, but in your own life also, if you are not following the moral path. Social phenomena becomes a converging point for individuals. So all social phenomena, collective and cultural narratives. I repeat friends, social phenomena becomes a converging point for individual, collective and cultural narratives. So one or two great persons is born in the society, and what happens? They influence, they shape the culture, and all these things help the later people who are born in that particular culture. So you always feel proud of that. Why? Because those narratives consciously and unconsciously help you shape your psyche, your understanding, your knowledge, your knowing, your individuality. It is a methodology in which the researcher attempts to illuminate the meanings of personal stories and events. So, everybody has his or her personal story, but as a researcher, you'll have to decipher it. You'll have to rewrite this story to understand what is the essence of his or her life. So, narrative is a mode of thinking. It is a mode of an expression of culture's storehouse of knowledge. These are the words which have been asserted by Bruno, that narrative is a mode of thinking. It's an expression of culture's storehouse of knowledge, and that's why in our Panchatantra stories, our Upanishadic stories, they are full with dialogues. They help you to understand certain things which it is not easy to understand if you haven't lived that experience. Friends, teachers, knowledge and understanding of school and classroom practice is stored in narratives, and discourses about practice is often in narrative form. For example, what kind of teacher I should be? And just for that, what you do, you read the stories of the great teachers of your culture, and so many narratives are floating in the culture. Taking a clue from that, you also devote your life to be a knowledgeable person. So the inquiry focuses on mediated action, and it is a qualitative and interpretive in nature. So narrative story, in short, narrative inquiry is nothing but storytelling. I would like to share a few words. What is importance of storytelling? See, you do one experiment. You ask two people to share a story of the same phenomenal experience. One who is narrating someone else's story, and one who is narrating his own story. You will try to understand the difference between the two narrations. Though the phenomena may be same, but the experiential reality and the way person is depicting it, you will find there is a qualitative difference between the two. And that's why what is happening nowadays. There are some voluntary organizations. For example, I would like to mention Katha. They emphasize on why powerful stories should be shared with younger generations. Even the older generation also love to read story. And as a researcher, you should be in a position to understand the story of yourself, story of others whom you have involved in your research, and connecting these two with the stories from which that person comes, the story of that culture, story of that civilization. Why are we proud to say that somebody, when himself or herself is introducing to the audience on the foreign soil, and he or she asserts, I come from the land which has given the birth of the zero. Zero was not invented by that person. Zero was not invented by India, but it was invented by an Indian who was born in India. But still the entire Indian feel proud of that. And when somebody shares a story of Ramanujam, Aryabhat or many others, you feel very proud. And being a student of mathematics, being teacher of mathematics, you feel, oh, I should also do something else. see the powerful influence that a narrative can make in your life. The way it can, this is the powerful way which can influence your psyche. Now friends, I would like to move over to narrative inquiry as a storytelling. We have talked a lot about the storytelling. The storytelling is what? The storytelling may be autobiographical. So suppose somebody, if you want your 5 cases as a participant in your research to share, the 5 individuals as participants in your research to share their story, what can you do? You can simply ask them to write their autobiography. And that's why the storytelling may be the autobiographical sketch, it may be the biographical sketch, it may be the testimonials, or in any other form. But all the forms must contain something which has the quality of coming out as a story. Thus, narrative is spoken, narrative may be written, narrative may be visual story, and can be presented in various discursive formats. And they serve multiple purposes and can be approached in diverse analytical and interpretive ways. It's not that you know the story, you have noted down the story, and that's it. After that story, you have to analyze it. And that's why diverse analytical and interpretive ways you can collect the story, you can create the story, you can construct the story, and on the basis of that, you can come out with a different kind of theory based on the facts that are there in the story. So due to complexity and extensive detail, narrative data provide rich descriptions and reveal meanings embedded not only in the content of the story but also in the words and images in the form of symbols. What do I mean by that? When I say that due to complexity and extensive detail, narrative data provides rich description. When you narrate your own story, it's not that any word you pick up. You are very careful when you pick up words. So the same word may reveal multiple meanings. So it reveals meanings embedded not only the content of the story but also in the words. Not only in words but also in images, the symbols that you use, and it is used to tell the story. So narrative has become today one of the most popular postmodern methods. Why? Because it yields a contextually embedded text or set of images that can be subjected to multiple interpretations and discursive analysis. And I would like to re-emphasize that when I say that in today's world, the postmodern world, if you can call so, it yields a contextually embedded text or set of images that can be subjected to multiple interactions, multiple interpretations and discursive analysis. So before I move to narrative data, I would like to share a few things with you as a researcher. If you are going to use narrative inquiry as a research method for your research, friends, what you need to do, you need to, the kind of words are there, the sentences are there, the facts are there, the contents are there. You need to create an image which captures the entire story in 1 para, 2 para or 3 paras. Number one. Number two, for that, the analysis technique that you need to use is called discursive analysis. Why? Because all those facts, all the stories, all the narratives that a human being is sharing with you, it's not the product of only his interaction with himself or also his interaction with others. And that's why it is called the multiple interactions with multiple people. And then he is reflecting about his own story. Now let's talk about narrative data. The methods to obtain narrative data are diverse. Interviewing and recording, it could be audio recording, it could be video recording, are among information gathering strategies used most frequently to collect narrative data. This is the one technique that somebody is just sharing with you and you are tapping his voice, or you are doing videography also because you want to capture the non-verbal clue also. Apart from this, photography is a part of narrative data. Drawing could be the part of narrative data. Painting could be part of narrative data. Even creative non-fiction writing could be the part of creative data. Autobiography is one of the most valuable source of narrative data, friends. Object reading and co-constructed narratives are other methods used to tell and present the story. From a data set, inductive analysis is used to reveal the themes, the patterns and meanings that emerge from storytelling. Here I would like to say one thing. Why do you want somebody to narrate his or her data with you, or his or her story with you? Why? Because on the basis of the content that he or she is sharing with you, you are capturing the things in a logical way, and when you organize it logically and systematically, you want to have the revealing themes in front of you, and on the basis of those revealing themes you generate some patterns, and combining the two you try to give a different meanings that are emerging from that storytelling. And therefore it's not simply recording the narratives. And as I said earlier, when you are talking about the narrative data, it could be writings, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be paintings, it could be anything which help you to understand, or which you think that could be the part of your data, right? So combining all these, the analysis technique that you have to use is inductive analysis, and that is used to do what? That should be used to reveal the themes, number one. That should be used to generate some patterns, and finally the meanings that are emerging from storytelling. Now let's talk about the type of narrative studies. When we talk about types of narrative studies, it is important to understand the approach. So one approach to narrative research is to differentiate types of narrative research by the analytic strategies used by the authors. Number one. Number two, here I would like to quote Pockingham in 1995 takes this approach and distinguishes between analysis of narratives using narrative using paradigm thinking, and that's very important. Why? Because that will help to create descriptions of themes that hold across stories or taxonomies of types of stories and narrative analysis, in which researchers collect descriptions of events or happenings and then configure them into a story using a plot line. And here I would like to emphasize on the plot line. After that, what you do, this is the one approach. Suppose this approach is not convincing, then you can think about another approach. So a second approach is to emphasize the variety of forms found in narrative research practices, and that could be a biographical study. Suppose I want to study a person who has been a great personality and he hasn't written anything. Now how can I study that person? I'm not simply interested in the life journey. I'm interested his life journey from his own experiential point of view. In that case, I have no option but to consult the biographical study. Or you may think about a life history, oral history, etc., etc. So it's not necessarily that only one approach you can adopt, you can approach another also. And here I would like to assert, not necessarily these two approaches are sufficient to do narrative inquiry. You can generate your own approach also, maybe combining the two. Or you can use as a mixed approach when you join approach A and approach B both. So in short, I'll again reorganize both the approaches as Buckingham said. So what approach it took? It distinguished between analysis of narrative using paradigm thinking to create descriptions of themes that hold across stories, or taxonomies of types of the stories, and narrative analysis, in which what happens, in which researchers collect descriptions of events or collect the descriptions of happenings and then configure them into a story using a plot line. Second approach, which you can work combinedly, what is that? To emphasize the variety of forms found in narrative research practices, and that is a biographical study, a life history, oral history, etc., etc. Now friends, let's me allow to discuss, because you are very interested, not only the theoretical dimension of narrative inquiry or the different shades, the nature of the data that you generate from the using the narrative inquiry, but also the procedure, because in research, procedure is very important. So now let me discuss about procedure for conducting narrative research. See, the different literature talks in different style, but when you scan all the literature as far as the procedures for conducting narrative inquiry or narrative research is concerned, at least 4 or 5 procedures emerge unanimously. So the first approach is determine if the research problem or your research question best fits narrative research. Not necessarily that all research problems or all research questions are suitable for narrative inquiry. So the first procedure is that you will have to determine if the research problem or the research question that you have undertaken for the research best fits narrative research. So that is the first procedure. The second procedure is select one or more individuals who have stories or life experiences to tell. If they don't have stories, if they don't have life experiences to tell, they cannot become the subject of your study, and spend considerable time with them gathering their stories through multiple types of information. For example, suppose if you want to understand that what it feels when you loses everything when earthquake takes place. Now, only those people can be the part of your sampling or can be the part of your subjects who have experienced this phenomena. Or suppose what it happens when somebody is divorced from somebody. You cannot ask somebody hypothetically, what do you think, what will happen when you will be divorced? Whatever he or she is saying, that's only the imagination and the guess. But actually when you will approach the people who are really divorcee, they will tell you what kind of pains and pleasure, the turmoils they undergo. Because separation or separation of any form or in any case, any situation is very, very painful. Now, how will you capture that pain? Or how will you capture the suffering? I have my personal experiences when I have interviewed single child, and the moment I started talking to them about their other parent, I found that they used to feel very disturbed, and some of them started crying without uttering a single word. And as a researcher, it was a very difficult moment for that. But as a researcher, I was trained enough to capture the phenomena from the research perspective. And this is what you will learn gradually. It's not that in one day you will learn that when you are feeling, when somebody is just sharing his or her pain with you, and you will learn, oh, how to write about, how to describe that pain. The third procedure, which is very important, is collect information about the context of these stories. Friends, in qualitative research, it's not, everything is a contextual. But in qualitative research, context is very, very significant thing. And that's why you as a researcher, you must collect information about the context of these stories. So, narrative researchers situate individual stories within participants' personal experiences, their culture, and their historical context. It means their time and their space. Certain symbols have got unique and universal meaning. For example, 0. People say that, zero is a number which has no value. But see, when you grow, the similar understanding changes, and your experience with 0 also changes as you grow. Like if it is a nothing, then fine. When you do operations, like you add, it remains same. You subtract, it remains same. But what happens when you multiply some amount or some numbers with 0? Or when you divide, you will find something different happens. But how to experience that? And that's why Ramanujan's story is filled with so many narratives today. So these are the three procedures, friends, we have talked. Let's move to the another procedure. Procedure number 4. The fourth procedure is analyze the participants' stories and then re-story them into a framework that makes sense. I repeat here. Now one story the subject has shared with you. This is the one. Now what you have done, you have analyzed that story. But after that, what you will do? You will have to again write the story. And that writing the story is called, in narrative framework, restoring the things. So you'll have to re-story them into a framework that makes sense. When I'm saying re-story, it doesn't mean that you have to repeat the story. No. As a researcher, you are not allowed to repeat the story. Rather, you have to rewrite the story so that it can make sense from the research point of view. So what is a restoring? Restoring is the process of reorganizing the stories into some general type of framework. You'll have to develop some framework. This is the fourth procedure. And the fifth one is, which is a very important procedure when you are using narrative inquiry as a research method, and that is collaborate with participants by actively involving them in the research. So still the role of subject is not over, friends, and even your role is not over. What you'll have to do after writing the re-story, or after doing the re-story, again you have to sit with the subject and ask them, see, this is what on the basis of your story I have done as a form of restoring. And maybe the way you have written the re-story of this story, he or she may agree, but as a researcher, you are the researcher. If it is appropriate from your perspective, you don't need to go back to your subject again and again. So friends, conclusively I would like to say that the narrative inquiry is nothing but the story and the re-story. Now what is the phenomena called story and re-story? The phenomena of a story and re-story, what it does, for example, one story took place, one phenomena took place in the life of certain individuals, and somebody wrote Ramayana. So the Ramayana is a story. Something happened in some people's life, and an author wrote a Mahabharata. Similarly, all religious texts, it could be the Bible, it could be the Quran, it could be any other, it could be the Guru Granth Sahib, right? I mean, all lived experiences have been presented to us in the form of a story. Now, you can contest some of the arguments that some of these are not written by people. But anyway, whether people have written it or not, but we find it in a written form, so there is a reason to presume that somebody might have written that. Now, these stories, if somebody is conducting research on the basis of these stories, what he or she is supposed to do? Is he or she supposed to rewrite Ramayana on the basis of the facts that are there, or something else you'll have to decipher? See, thousands of books have been written on the basis of one text. Why? Because each individual mind, individually and collectively, after the research, they come out with something significant. So the story was there, you do some research, you come out with a particular story, and that story will help you to understand the human psyche. It will help them to understand the human self. It will help you to understand human identity. And I find this technique as a research method, qualitative research, in the qualitative research paradigm, is one of the very, very powerful to understand the self of the human being, the identity of the human being. Like, what happens or why it happens when you loses everything and out of that you gain something. Some people, what do? They again create some material things. And there are some people, though they have lost everything, but still if they have gained something on the basis of that, they feel like giving it back to the society. I would like to share one story with you. Like I have read somewhere, and one of my friends has done this study, though he might not have used narrative inquiry to understand that. There were 5 or 10 individuals in a particular village. They lost everything in the earthquake. Some lost their buildings, some lost their property, some lost something else. There was an old man. He lost not only his house, only a small house, but also his only daughter. So what this researcher did, he interviewed them. He visited there in that village and interviewed each one of them. And he asked that what prompted you to get a bus shed constructed, to get a piau constructed, instead of constructing your own house? Despite the fact you have lost the only daughter, now who will take care of you? And the fact he shared, it's an amazing one. He said, when I constructed something which will be used not only by me, by all, whosoever is passing through that way, maybe a thirsty man, or maybe the person who needs shelter in the summer, right? I find I'm reliving my life. I'm seeing my daughter in all of them. Now see this story, when you collect this story from first-hand experiences of that one, and when you re-story this, and then you'll have to come out why this happened in his life only. Why not this phenomenon took place in others' life? Or you can also write that why the same phenomena leaves a different impact on all in a different way. And that's the beauty of the narrative inquiry, friends. So narration is a very, very powerful tool of research methodology. So friends, in this part of the discussion, we discussed about narrative tone, what is narrative inquiry, and narrative inquiry as a storytelling. This is all about this part 1, and I hope that you have enjoyed this session. Once again, we shall meet in the next part of the discussion of this presentation, in which we shall discuss about narrative data, types of narrative data and narrative studies, then procedures for conducting narrative research, and the narrative inquiry as a story and re-story. Namaskar.